They say a home is the safest place one can be. But on that quiet summer night in Powder Springs, Georgia, safety did not exist behind those walls. It was July 31st, 2007, when a horrifying tragedy unfolded inside a modest three-bedroom house on Country Cove Way. One that would leave a community shaken, and investigators desperate for answers that even today remain hauntingly out of reach. Inside the home lived 47-year-old Jane Kuria, a hardworking nurse and dedicated mother originally from central Kenya. With her were her three children, 19-year-old Isabella, her bright and ambitious firstborn, 16-year-old Annabelle, known for her kindness and love for church, and 7-year-old Jeremy, Jane's youngest son. That summer, they were also hosting 11-year-old Peter, a cousin who had traveled from Kenya to visit. But sometime between midnight and 3:30 a.m., an unknown intruder entered their home. What happened next was brutal and merciless. By the time relatives came looking 2 days later, 3 members of the Kuria family, Jane, Isabella, and Annabelle, had been violently murdered. Their bodies were found in different parts of the home, each showing signs of a fierce and personal attack. The 2 youngest boys, Jeremy and Peter, were discovered alive but gravely injured, clinging to life. What made the crime even more chilling was what was missing. There were no signs of forced entry, no murder weapon was left behind, no traceable fingerprints, no DNA. It was as if the killer had appeared from the shadows and vanished back into them. Detectives rushed to investigate. They interviewed neighbors, relatives, church friends, even community members in Kenya. At one point, suspicion briefly surrounded a close family friend. But without evidence, the case collapsed into silence. And so a mother who fought for the rights and dignity of others, who once fled her homeland seeking safety, met a fate more violent than anything she had ever warned others about. To this day, the murders of Jane, Isabella, and Annabelle remain unsolved. The question still hangs in the air, heavy and cold. Who entered that home? And why did they want the Kuria family erased? This is their story. Jane Kuria was born in central Kenya in 1960, where she grew up. From a young age, she had a deep love for books and a strong passion for learning and education. After completing high school, she joined a local teachers training college so that she could pursue a career in education. Jane was also well known for her advocacy for human rights, especially women's rights. She frequently spoke out against female genital mutilation, FGM, and worked to educate communities on the dangers of the practice. Because these traditions were deeply rooted in some cultural beliefs, her outspoken views were often met with hostility. By opposing FGM, Jane was taking a risky stand. During her time in college, she met the man who would become her husband, Mr. Kuria. The two fell in love, and in 1987, shortly after Jane completed her studies, they married and settled on the outskirts of Nairobi. The following year, in 1988, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Isabella. Their second daughter, Annabelle, was born in 1991, and in the year 2000, they had their youngest child, a son named Jeremy. Sadly, tragedy struck in 2001 when the head of the family, Mr. Kuria, passed away from pneumonia. His death left Jane as a widow, now solely responsible for raising their 3 young children. Around the same time, their family home burned down under mysterious circumstances. Many believe this fire may have been linked to Jane's activism against FGM, suggesting that someone may have been targeting her. Feeling unsafe, Jane decided to leave Kenya. In 2001, she secured a visa and moved to the United States. Her immigration documents stated that she was seeking asylum because of the danger she faced in Kenya due to her public stand against female circumcision. She expressed fear that returning to Kenya would put her and her children's lives at risk. When she first arrived in the U.S., she lived in Boston, Massachusetts, but in 2002, she relocated to Powder Springs, Georgia, a quiet suburb northwest of Atlanta, because she had relatives living there. The family moved into a modest 3-bedroom home on Country Cove Way. Adjusting to a new country was difficult, especially as a single immigrant mother. Jane faced both cultural challenges and financial hardship. To support her family, she worked 2 jobs, taking overnight shifts as a nursing aide and working as a daytime caregiver. She later became a nurse at a nearby nursing home. Despite her heavy workload, Jane remained a devoted and attentive mother. She ensured her children attended school, completed their homework, and maintained good grades. She wanted them to make the most of the opportunities available to them. Jane was strict, yet cheerful, outgoing, and very direct about her feelings. Life in the U.S. gradually became stable. Jane's life revolved around her children and her Christian faith. She became an active member of a local church in Powder Springs, sometimes leading Bible study sessions. The family was well liked in their community. Neighbors admired Jane's warmth and her children's respectful manners. Annabelle even started volunteering at the church. Jane formed close bonds with the elderly residents she cared for at the nursing home. By 2007, her oldest daughter, Isabella, was 19, had finished high school, and was studying to become a pharmacist in Chattanooga. Annabelle, at 16, was a high school sophomore, and 7-year-old Jeremy was in elementary school. The Kuria family lived a peaceful life. During the summer of 2007, Jane's cousin Pauline, who also lived in Georgia, had her 11-year-old son Peter visiting from Kenya. Because Jeremy and Peter were close in age, Pauline dropped Peter off at the Kuria home on June 29, 2007, so the boys could spend time together. The boys played happily that day, but on July 30, 2007, when Pauline tried calling Jane to check on Peter, no one answered. After repeated attempts, worry began to set in. Jane and her daughters were not the type to ignore calls. Pauline sent her older son, Owen, to the house. He saw Jane's black Toyota in the driveway, knocked on the door, and looked through the windows. No response and no sign of activity. He assumed the family had been picked up by someone and left. However, by the morning of August 1, 2007, there was still no word. Alarmed, Pauline went to her cousin Diana, who lived nearby, and asked her to drive her to Jane's home. When they arrived, the car was still there. Pauline became frantic. Diana told Pauline to knock at the front while she checked the back. When Diana reached the back deck, she noticed the sliding glass door leading to the kitchen was open. She entered, expecting to find Jane preparing breakfast, but instead found the house dark and unsettlingly silent. Only the TV was playing cartoons. Diana called out, but no one responded. As she walked further inside, she noticed blood on the floor and walls, and then she saw a body. Shocked, Diana screamed for Pauline to leave the house. She used Pauline's phone to call 911. Police and paramedics quickly arrived. Initially, they believed they were responding to one victim, but upon entering, they realized the situation was far more severe. An officer signaled to Diana using hand gestures, 5 fingers, then 2, then 3. When Diana asked what it meant, the officer explained that 2 of the family members had survived and had already been taken away for medical treatment, but 3 were deceased. It was later confirmed that the victims were Jane, Isabella, and Annabelle. Miraculously, the 2 boys, Jeremy and Peter, had survived, but were critically injured. Jeremy was airlifted to Atlanta Children's Hospital for emergency surgery. Peter was transported by ambulance, as his injuries were somewhat less severe. Because investigators feared the attacker might return to finish the job, the boys were placed under police protection while receiving treatment. Detectives described the crime scene as extremely brutal. Jane had clearly fought fiercely for her life. She had been beaten beyond what would have been necessary to kill her, indicating the attacker was in a rage. Isabella had likely been surprised at the stairs and killed where she fell. Annabelle had also been attacked suddenly in the hallway. The boys were attacked while asleep in bed. The pillows likely softened some of the blows, which is believed to be the only reason they survived. Investigators determined the murders likely occurred between midnight and 3:30 a.m. on July 31st. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Jane had willingly let the killer inside. There was also no murder weapon found in the house, implying it had been brought by the attacker. Strangely, there was almost no transfer of blood from room to room and no blood outside the home, making detectives question how the killer could have left such a gruesome scene without leaving any trace of their own DNA. With little physical evidence, police turned to people in the family's life. At a gathering of family and friends, a man named Patrick, who attended the same church and had a close friendship with Jane, told detectives they should look into a Kenyan gang known for targeting opponents. But upon investigation, the gang connection did not fit. Police also discovered Patrick and Jane had spoken multiple times a day for at least a month before the murders, except on the night of the killings, when no call was made by Patrick. He became a person of interest, but there was no evidence tying him to the crime. Weeks later, Peter regained consciousness, but his memory was inconsistent. Jeremy eventually awoke, but could not remember anything. With no solid leads and no forensic evidence, the case stalled. Jane, Isabella, and Annabelle were buried in Kenya, but Jeremy, still hospitalized, could not attend. When the family returned to the U.S., they found that another relative, Elizabeth, had taken full custody of Jeremy, changed his documents, sold Jane's home and car, and was supposed to put the money in a trust, but Jeremy later claimed he never received any of it and that he was isolated and not treated with affection. Jeremy and Peter both tried to rebuild their lives, but the trauma remained. 18 years have passed, and the case remains unsolved. The mystery that existed on August 1st, 2007 still remains today. Who did this and why? A family with hopes and dreams was destroyed, and the person responsible was never held accountable. If you have any information, please contact the Powder Springs Police Department. May Jane, Isabella, and Annabelle Kuria rest peacefully.